Hey y'all, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are when you see this video. Thank you for joining me, Dorothea, on Through an Orthodox Christian Lens. We're going to be discussing what's been going on with the Middle East, with Israel and Gaza, the ceasefire. It's gone into effect, I believe it went into effect yesterday. We'll see what happens. The only issue is that this is just supposedly a ceasefire for Gaza and Israel, between them, because Israel isn't stopping its attacks in the West Bank, and it isn't stopping its bombings in Lebanon. So today is October 11th, 2025, and so we're going to go to the first story after we've gone into the ceasefire issue that they've come up with, and anything that has Jared Kushner in it, I'm not really thrilled over what kind of deal this is, other than it must have to do with money. That's just my view. So we're going to go into the first story, and it's this: GHF dismantles Gaza sites where thousands of Palestinian aid seekers were killed. Yes. Well, this is good news, because it was never really about giving people food. So, let's see. Starving Palestinians were attacked by Israeli troops and U.S. mercenaries on a daily basis as they were trying to receive aid, as we know. So, the U.S.-Israeli Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has begun to dismantle after killing thousands of Palestinians in the past months during a failed mission worth tens of millions. This is the site of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the death trap, run by American mercenaries in the Gaza Strip, that has killed approximately 3,000 starved Palestinians by shooting them while seeking aid. It's been dismantled, which, as I said, is a good thing. Let's go over to the next part here. The news comes as a ceasefire deal has gone into effect, ending the 2-year Israeli genocide against Palestinians, which unfolded after Operation Al-Aqsa flood in October 2023. As part of the 20-point Trump plan announced last month, GHF's mission will come to an end, and the UN and other international aid organizations will resume humanitarian aid deliveries across the Strip. Well, thank God. Around 3,000 Palestinians have been killed, as we said. The GHF failed to deliver adequate amounts of aid to starving. Well, yeah, because I don't think that was ever really their agenda or their plan. I think that was just a front to exterminate more Palestinians. That's my view. I mean, we also had U.S. mercenaries there. They contributed to the violence, according to multiple testimonies from anonymous contractors. And we know Anthony Aguilera, who was there in that group of people with the U.S. military, that this was going on. He saw it in front of his eyes. It was horrible. So, this is great that they're dismantling and that real aid can get in there. Now, having said that, let's go into the next information I want to share. Hundreds of U.S. troops headed to Israel to monitor, in quotes, Gaza ceasefire. So President Trump is determined to disarm Hamas using troops from Arab states in Turkey. Okay, I wonder how that's going to go over. He wants to use Arab troops from Arab states in Turkey. Okay, so what will the U.S. troops be doing? Supposedly monitoring, right? The U.S. will deploy up to 200 troops to Israel as part of a multinational task force to monitor the ceasefire with Hamas and coordinate humanitarian and aid deliveries in Gaza. Okay, I hope this is true. The task force, led by Admiral Brad Cooper of U.S. Central Command, will operate a civil military coordination center and will reportedly include troops from Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, and UAE. Okay, Well, let's see how it goes. One senior official said U.S. forces will not enter Gaza, but will operate a joint control center to integrate the multinational force going in. The multinational force will notify both Israel and Hamas via Egypt and Qatar of the situation on the ground and any potential violations of the truce, one of the officials said. On Thursday, U.S. President Donald Trump announced that Israel and Hamas agreed to a ceasefire involving an end to Israel's military operations in Gaza, a partial withdrawal of Israeli troops, a prisoner exchange, and a resumption of humanitarian aid into the enclave. Troop ceasefire plan includes establishing a temporary international stabilization force to deploy to Gaza. The deployment of U.S. forces may also include overseeing efforts by troops from regional states to disarm Hamas, a key Israeli demand. Well, we'll see if that actually happens. I do remember former CIA analyst Larry Johnson brought up the fact that even if Hamas disarms and disappears as far as fighting because they don't have the arms, he said there were 14 other Palestinian groups fighting in that area, in Gaza and other areas. I think it was just in Gaza, but still, they're there, so it's not like everything's just going to stop and that Israel is just going to be able to extinguish the rest of the Palestinians with no resistance. So President Trump wants all of this war to get completed, but then not be where you go back to what was there before. So his vision for what comes next is a Gaza that has a local police force but is not allowed to do a military buildup. All the terror infrastructure is destroyed. Okay. The Palestinians are stuck in this position, or they don't have, they don't even have an army, a real legitimate army. They don't have a way to protect themselves other than these militia, whatever you want to call them, freedom resistance groups, terror groups, whatever you want to call them. I don't think it's completely a terror group. It's not like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, but I believe that because they don't have any army, this is all they have. And we have to remember that Netanyahu was supporting Hamas at the beginning of this. Meaning when Hamas first came into being, Netanyahu was supporting it. In fact, people were talking about that the other day, the analysts, that this was so. So we'll see what okay, so let's see what happens with this. Okay, I really don't have much hope in this, but I do have to say that at least there's a bit of a ceasefire in Gaza to give the Palestinians a break. They really need to have food, they need to have aid, they need medicine, they need all these things. And, it's just humane to be doing these things to help them. And the fact that they never got this for a long time, for a couple years, constantly under attack, it's not a good thing. So I am glad to see that. I follow a guy who lives in Gaza. He has a YouTube channel, and he's living in a tent right now. He moved out of his house, his little apartment in Gaza City, because he had to evacuate. But he's not going back right now. He's staying in his tent because his house was destroyed. So we will see what happens. I think it's good that the hostages are going to be returned, both the Israeli ones and the Palestinian ones. I always think that's a good thing, and that'll give relief to the Israeli families for sure, and hopefully and also the Palestinians. So that's a good thing. But the root cause of this is occupation, Israeli occupation. And in order for a lasting peace to happen, Israel has got to get out of the Palestinian territory. And until that happens, she doesn't believe that this will stop, because the occupation and oppression will just continue, and it has. And again, we have to recall that Netanyahu is wanting to finish his Greater Israel project, and that then he and his far-right government extremists want to continue ethnically cleansing and killing to get these Palestinians out. So, this little opinion article, I don't know, I'm going to read some of it. The delusional ceasefire and the inevitable resumption of fighting, which is what I was just talking about. So, the world has greeted the new ceasefire agreement between Israel and the Palestinians with cautious optimism. However, beneath the diplomatic courtesy and carefully selected words lies an unpleasant fact. This agreement is built on sand. The ceasefire, hailed by world leaders as a breakthrough, is no more than a temporary pause in a war that shows no signs of coming to an end. Four primary lethal factors guarantee its collapse, and the resumption of hostilities is not a matter of if, but when. The hostage gambit and Netanyahu's endgame. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces an impossible political equation. He promised the Israeli public nothing less than the absolute destruction of Hamas. He has failed to accomplish that mission spectacularly. The moment Israeli hostages and recovered remains return to Israel, Netanyahu will be faced with a stark decision between his own political survival and holding to an agreement that yields neither victory nor security. As one unnamed senior Israeli official said to journalists, the pressure to finish what we started will be intolerable once our citizens are home. The words, stripped of diplomatic nicety, reveal Israel's accurate strategic timeline. A ceasefire is a pause, not an end. The calculation Netanyahu makes is grimly simple. His political fortunes are directly tied to Hamas's destruction, making the group's survival an existential threat to his leadership. Netanyahu's coalition, a patchwork of zealots and opportunists, has wagered its legitimacy on total victory. His critics in Israel see this truce as nothing more than political theater to buy him time. For a man fighting both for his job and to stay out of prison, restraint is not really an instinct. The ceasefire provides cover only to bring back the hostages before returning to military action inevitably. Israel's insistence, this is the disarmament deadlock, Israel's insistence on the complete disarmament of Hamas is predicated upon a fundamental misunderstanding as well as willful misrepresentation of Hamas's nature and resolve. Hamas has stated time and again that disarmament will come after the achievement of a Palestinian state. This is not obstinacy rhetoric, it is existential logic. Unlike conventional armies with tanks, warplanes, and arsenals that can be counted and surrendered, Hamas's strength lies in decentralized networks of fighters with light weapons, improvised explosives, and intimate knowledge of Gaza's terrain. Hamas does not view itself as an army that can be disarmed, but as people defending their homeland. Even if the rockets were piled up and erased tomorrow, the technological expertise and the determination to rearm would remain. Disarmament without statehood is, for Hamas, less of a concession than a surrender. The demand that Hamas surrender is its defensive capabilities, while Israel enjoys absolute military superiority, including nuclear ambiguity and U.S. guarantees, exposes the lopsided at the heart of the deal contrived to get the oppressed to sign their own defeat. Yeah, that's how I see it too. The guarantee that never was. The most glaring weakness of the agreement, perhaps, is that it includes no enforceable guarantees whatsoever. President Donald Trump, for all his self-congratulatory announcements of peace in the Middle East, has conspicuously refused to provide American backing for the implementation of the accord. The omission is not accidental. Trump's administration has instinctively parroted Netanyahu's hardline approach, employing the same rhetoric of eradication and final victory. In practice, this has meant providing uncritical diplomatic cover and serving as a veto-wielding shield at the United Nations. Without American pressure to maintain the ceasefire, Netanyahu encounters no significant constraint preventing him from resuming military operations whenever it suits his political interests. If President Trump genuinely intended to end the war in the Middle East, he possesses a straightforward tool, acknowledging Palestinian statehood and pledging America's support for its realization within a specified time frame. However, Trump's approach tends to be deal-oriented rather than changing the destiny of the region. His foreign policy, a combination of ego and donor arithmetic, has habitually handled Palestinian aspirations as a chip to be bargained rather than a cause to be promoted. The pro-Israel lobby and high-dollar campaign donors will ensure that such recognition will never be offered. Trump's policy of lecturing on peace while waging war is almost theatrical. His peace plans, in quotes, are photo op announcements, not historic pledges. Netanyahu plays along, knowing the script by heart. Together, they sing an old duet. Release the hostages, declare a humanitarian victory, and resume the campaign. Hamas leadership knows the performance very well, but bets on growing Israeli public exhaustion and international pressure to restrict Netanyahu's choices in the long term. The poison of revenge, strategic considerations aside, the most lethal of all forces, revenge. Hamas has accomplished what most deemed impossible, humiliated one of the world's most technologically advanced militaries, outwitted its intelligence services, and transformed Israel from a Western darling to the most hated country on the planet. For Netanyahu, this is not only a political setback, but an existential affront. His identity, the self-proclaimed Mr. Security, has been exposed as hollow. The Israeli Defense Forces, long lionized as invincible, now appear vulnerable, even rattled. World opinion has turned decisively against Israel's operations in Gaza, and the once ironclad support of Western capitals is noticeably snapping. A ceasefire that leaves Hamas intact, still armed, and claiming victory is a mortal threat to Israel. The psychological need to reestablish deterrence and erase humiliation has, in the past, been a harbinger of escalation. Revenge is not a policy, but in this situation, it is the driving force behind the policy. Netanyahu, cornered and defiant, may see in renewed conflict his only path to political survival. He has lost the war of perception. Now he is going to fight again to forget it. So, the conclusion is the current ceasefire does not address any of the fundamental realities that drive this conflict, including occupation, statelessness, and the imbalance of power between Israel and the Palestinians. It is a transactional pause designed to gain short-term gains, the return of hostages, while just delaying the inevitable confrontation. Without credible international guarantees, without resolving the question of Palestinian sovereignty, and without tempering Israel's desire for military retribution, this accord will soon shatter. The world may hail this temporary cessation, but those who look closely recognize it for what it is, the calm before the next storm, a truce written in disappearing ink. So, I think that guy is right. The guy who wrote this was Jasmine Al-Azawi. I think it sounds pretty accurate to me. Now, we all know that the Iran-Israel war is coming, and maybe that's perhaps what he's going to be doing next. I don't know, but we know it's coming. The last article I'm going to share with you is where was that? Pentagon Chief Hegseth announces Qatari Air Force facility at Idaho base. I find this very odd and somewhat disturbing, but I'll read it and then we'll go from there. The U.S. and Qatar have signed a letter of agreement to bring a Qatari F-15 fighter jet contingent to a U.S. military base. U.S. Secretary of Defense Hegseth has announced that the United States and Qatar have signed this letter of agreement to build a Qatari Emirati Air Force facility at a U.S. Air Force base in the western U.S. state of Idaho. Now, why are we allowing foreigners in and having a base in our country? Now, we do this to practically every other country in the world, but I'm just surprised that they're doing this. What is this really all about? The announcement on Friday came during a meeting between Hegseth and Qatari Defense Minister Sheikh Zayed bin, I can't pronounce that, at the Pentagon. Hegseth praised Qatar's role in helping to mediate Gaza ceasefire talks, with an initial phase of a deal between Israel and Hamas going into effect on Friday. No one other than President Trump could have achieved the peace that we believe will be a lasting peace in Gaza, and Qatar played a substantial role from the beginning. Sure. Again, this isn't going to happen. So Sheikh Zayed, meanwhile, also hailed the cooperation between Washington and Doha on the ceasefire breakthrough, which aims to end Israel's 2-year-long war in Gaza. That conflict has left more than 67,190 Palestinians dead. I think it's higher than that. He said the agreement showed what can be achieved when the U.S. works with partners in the region, including Egypt and Turkey, with courage and trust. Hegseth then shifted his remarks to the Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho, which he said would host a contingent of these Qatari F-15s and pilots to enhance our combined training, increase lethality, and interoperability. Qatar currently hosts the largest U.S. Air Force base, as we know, the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. It was also named a major non-NATO ally by U.S. President Joe Biden in 2022. While working as a mediator to end the war in Gaza, Qatar has twice been targeted in the attacks by foreign countries, as we all know that. So I'm trying to think, is this about... now, of course, I'm wondering why, and I figure, okay, well, maybe MAGA isn't saying anything because they think, well, we're not going over, our troops aren't going over to fight, or we're not, of course, we already give money to Qatar all the time, so there's no difference in that. But I was thinking, are we trying to make a new connection in the Middle East instead of with Israel? I don't know. In place of it, I don't think that's going to happen, but I find this just a very strange move, and it feels rather uncomfortable to me to have this foreign military in our country, because, of course, now this must be what people feel like in the other countries with our bases there, but who knows? It's just thoughts I have. So those are all the stories I have for you now regarding the Middle East issues. If you like, you can share your thoughts below this video on what you think about all of this. A lot of things going on. And do you believe the ceasefire is going to last even past phase 1? Because the last time they had the ceasefire in January, they only got through phase 1 and Israel was back to bombing Gaza. So, what are your thoughts on that? What do you think about the Qatari, these military pilots coming into our base? How do you feel about that? Okay, so the good thing is about this ceasefire is that we will have food, water, medicines, aid, humanitarian aid of all kinds for the people of Palestine. The Israelis will get back their hostages, God willing, and as well for the Palestinians. Although they have a lot of Palestinians, but in their prisons there, even women and children. Let's hope that we can get most of them out. I know there's a Palestinian man that's considered a really good person that could lead the Palestinians. He's fair, and he seemed like a good option. But apparently, the Israelis are not going to let. He was on the list to be. He's been in like 20 or so years. I forget how long, something around there, in prison there. But he was supposed to be on the list to be, released. But the Israelis decided, no, we're not going to release him. No, we can't have some decent guy in Palestine. I don't think they want anybody in there that they don't have control over, to be honest. So anyway, hope you got that this was informative for you and you got a lot out of it. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for following my channel. And I hope you're having a great day. Until next time.